A soft autumn morning wrapped the city in a veil of mist, as golden rays tiptoed through the rustling trees outside a towering building of glass and steel. The breeze whispered along the sidewalk, carrying crisp leaves in its wake, like the world itself was waiting for something to begin. Emma Blake stood silently at the base of Cole International, its mirrored facade reflecting dreams and pressure in equal measure. In her hands, an old resume folder clutched tightly, as though it were the last weapon she had against the world. She was just a fresh graduate, heart full of hope, pockets nearly empty. But in her eyes there was something people couldn't look away from, a quiet kind of fierceness. The executive assistant position at Cole International wasn't just a job opportunity. It was her escape route, her hope, the last thing she had left to hold on to. What she didn't know was that on the top floor of that same tower, Adrian Cole, the city's youngest and most ruthless CEO, a man who never let his heart interfere with business, was waiting. Not for her, for the perfect candidate. The elevator climbed in silence, each floor number lighting up like a heartbeat thudding inside Emma's chest. She adjusted her collar, took a deep breath, and tried to steady her trembling hands. The plain suit she wore felt out of place amid the corporate luxury, but she knew the only thing that needed to stand out today was her capability. The doors opened to reveal a corridor paved in gleaming black stone, lined with abstract artwork and warm, golden lights. A sharply dressed receptionist glanced at Emma with an expression that was anything but welcoming. "Emma Blake, I'm here for the executive assistant interview," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Cole is expecting you. Follow me," the woman replied without checking her schedule, her tone suggesting that although Emma was on time, she was already late in a world ruled by impossibly high standards. As she followed the woman through the hushed hallway, Emma mentally recited her credentials: top of her class in business administration, internships at 2 prestigious firms, fluent in 3 languages. She was qualified, she knew that, but the stories about Adrian Cole were enough to make even the boldest falter. The heavy mahogany doors opened into a minimalist, elegant office where light from floor-to-ceiling windows poured across the floor like silk. Standing by the glass, his back to her, was a tall man in a charcoal suit tailored to perfection. When he turned around, his gaze hit her like a blade. It wasn't just that he was handsome, though he was, in a way that almost felt unfair. It was the way his eyes cut through everything she wore to shield herself. "Miss Blake," he said, his voice low and crisp. "Have a seat." Emma sat, back straight, hands still trembling slightly. Impressive resume. Top graduate, solid experience, multilingual, almost too perfect. "I don't believe in perfection, sir," she replied. "I believe in effort and adaptability." Adrian raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected such a direct answer. "Why Cole International? Someone like you could go somewhere easier." "Because I don't want easy. I want real challenges. And you are the definition of that." In that moment, something shifted in his gaze. The appraisal softened, giving way to something else, almost intrigued. He stood, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of her. "This job requires endurance, speed, and the ability to anticipate my needs before I even voice them. I'm a fast learner, sir, and I don't fear pressure as long as it's purposeful." A pause. Then, Adrian nodded slowly. "You start tomorrow, 7 a.m. HR will send you everything you need." Emma walked out with her head held high. But when the doors closed behind her, she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just veered down a path she would never come back from. Emma started the next morning at exactly 7 a.m. Adrian Cole didn't waste time with greetings or pleasantries. He issued tasks with clipped commands, his eyes sharp, his voice devoid of emotion. But Emma caught on quickly. She learned to read his moods by the way he rested his hand on the desk, the length of silence between sentences. She cleared his calendar before he asked, prepared files he hadn't yet mentioned. She became an unspoken extension of efficiency. Adrian said little, but he began to watch her more. Glances from across his desk, questions that were no longer razor-sharp, but almost curious. Sometimes, when she set a cup of coffee on his desk, just as he looked up, their eyes met for a single second, enough to make her breath catch. 2 months had passed since the day Emma stepped into Adrian Cole's office. 2 months of working beside him, keeping the right distance to remain proper, but just close enough that the silence between them grew heavier with each day. And then, that night arrived. The company's annual gala was held at the most luxurious hotel in the city. Crystal chandeliers glistened overhead, soft jazz filled the air, and a sea of formal gowns and suits sparkled beneath the golden lights. Emma stood in a quiet corner, wearing a black, square-neck dress that whispered elegance. Her glass of champagne remained untouched. She watched Adrian from afar. As always, he was the center of the room. Tall, composed in a tuxedo, his presence magnetic. But tonight, something was off. His complexion was pale, his hand shook slightly as he held his drink, and his gaze lacked its usual precision, as if he were fighting something unseen. Emma noticed it before anyone else. She set her glass down and approached him, leaning in just enough to whisper, "Mr. Cole, there's an urgent matter that needs your attention." His eyes flicked to hers, surprised, then grateful. "Good," he murmured. She guided him out, down to the parking garage where her car waited. Neither spoke during the ride down, though she saw how he leaned against the wall, brows furrowed. When the engine started, he spoke once. "Turn left at the next corner." His penthouse towered above the city, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows. When they entered, the silence felt oddly warm. He removed his coat and sank into the sofa, head tilted back. "You always show up at the right time," he said softly. "That's my job," Emma replied, though her voice held no certainty. "No." He looked up, gaze stripped of steel. "That's who you are." A step, then another. He stood before her. No desk, no titles, just a man, looking at her like she was the only thing in focus in a blurred world. Then, he kissed her. Not rushed, not calculated, but like he'd been holding back far too long. Emma didn't pull away. Her hand rested on his chest, feeling his heartbeat, frantic, like hers. That night, they said little. Only touches, broken breaths, and the quiet unraveling of every line they had drawn. In the dim light, his hand found hers. Not as a command, but as a search for something safe. It was real, and it was wrong, but neither of them stopped. When Emma awoke at dawn, sunlight slipping through the blinds, Adrian was still asleep, his arm draped over her. She rose quietly, dressed, and slipped out of the apartment like a thief of emotion, carrying a heart in turmoil and a secret not yet born. Everything was supposed to go back to normal. One night of weakness didn't mean a permanent shift. That's what Emma told herself each morning as she walked into the office with perfectly composed calm. She and Adrian didn't speak about that night. No promises, no follow-up, just silence, thick, suffocating silence. But her body refused to be silent. It started with relentless fatigue. She blamed it on work. Then came the morning nausea, gripping the edge of the sink as her world spun. The scent of coffee, once a comfort, now made her stomach twist. And then her period didn't come. For a long time. Emma knew. She just didn't want to know. But on a gray, overcast morning, she left the office earlier than usual and walked into a pharmacy on the far side of town, somewhere no one would recognize her. When the pharmacist asked, "Do you need a bag?" she only nodded. Words failed her. Back at home, she stepped into the bathroom, slowly. Every motion felt heavy, like unlocking a door she couldn't close again. 3 minutes. Just 3 minutes. But they stretched like an eternity. When the timer rang, she approached. Her heart thundered. 2 red lines, clear, undeniable. She slid down to the cold tiled floor, her back against the wall, arms curling instinctively around her flat stomach, where something small had already begun to grow. Her mind raced. Tell him or don't? How would he react? What about the job? His reputation? Emma knew Adrian was a man who controlled everything, and this was out of control, too intimate, too dangerous. She closed her eyes. Tears slipped down to her trembling lips. No, not now. She would keep this secret, at least until she knew exactly what she was walking into. The Monday morning meeting began like any other. High stakes, focused, unforgiving. Emma sat taking notes, her mind stretched thin. She tried to concentrate, but the scent of coffee from a nearby executive's cup made her stomach twist. Her vision blurred. The air felt too thick. Adrian's voice came from the head of the table. "Emma, have the Q3 market report on my desk before lunch." She nodded, swallowing the nausea rising in her throat. But seconds later, the room tilted, sounds warped, and then everything went gray. When Emma woke, she was lying on the long sofa in Adrian's private office. Soft lighting, his familiar cologne in the air, a low voice near her ear. "Emma, can you hear me?" She nodded faintly, eyes adjusting to the light. Adrian was kneeling beside her, suit jacket off, concern raw on his face. "You're not okay. This is the third time I've seen you nearly faint in 2 weeks. I'm just sleep deprived," she whispered. "Don't lie to me." In that moment, she knew. She couldn't hide it anymore. She looked him in the eye, every wall inside her crumbling. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. Adrian stood still for a few seconds, then sat beside her. Slowly. "Mine?" His voice cracked. She nodded. He said nothing more, just reached for her hand. Not tight, not possessive, just two people facing a truth laid bare between them, too real to take back. After the revelation, Adrian changed. He spoke less, thought more. But his gaze was no longer cold, it held something calculating, intentional. Emma, on the other hand, tried to keep everything normal. She stayed professional, avoided his eyes whenever possible. She was afraid. Afraid of what came next. Afraid of the price someone like him might pay for a mistake with someone like her. One evening, long after the office had emptied, Adrian entered without knocking. He stood for a moment, then said quietly, "We can't keep pretending this didn't happen." Emma put down her pen, eyes fixed on her desk. "Adrian, if you're worried about the company, the board, the media, I can step away. I'll resign. I'll go somewhere else. No one has to know." He was silent for a few seconds. Then he walked toward her, slow, steady. "You think I'm worried about my reputation? I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." Adrian gave a soft laugh, sad, honest. "Since meeting you, I've started losing the things I never needed, just to realize what I actually want to keep." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I don't want to hide. I don't want to keep you in the shadows. I want the world to know you are the one I choose. And this baby is a gift, not a mistake." Emma froze. Her hands trembled as he opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Please, don't answer yet," Adrian whispered. "I don't need certainty. Just let me know you'll think about it, not out of fear, but out of hope." She wanted to speak, but the words trembled behind the storm in her chest, so she simply nodded, not out of doubt, but because, for the first time, she believed she might be allowed to hope too. For the first time, she saw love and scandal standing side by side, waiting for her to choose a path. The news broke on Monday morning. A photo was released alongside a press statement. Adrian Cole, CEO of Cole International, holding hands with his executive assistant, Emma Blake. A simple line beneath read, "We are becoming a family." The financial world shook. Stock prices fluctuated, shareholders fumed, the media exploded. They called Emma the assistant who trapped the boss, called the child a scandal in a tailored suit. But through the storm, Adrian never hid. At the next shareholder meeting, he stood at the podium, gaze steady and unwavering. "I won't apologize for falling in love with someone who doesn't fit the mold you expect. I only apologize for once thinking real love was a weakness." The room fell silent. "If you believe I'm unfit to lead because I chose truth over image, I'll step down. But I won't walk away from her. Or from my child." That day, Emma watched from the hallway, her hand resting on the soft curve of her belly. She had never seen him stronger, not because of power, but because of the courage to love. That weekend, they moved into a smaller apartment, not to hide, but to choose a space quiet enough for a new beginning. In the kitchen, as Adrian set plates for dinner, Emma wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I've thought about it," she whispered. "My answer is yes." He turned to her, his gaze no longer sharp like it was in boardrooms, but warm, like the kitchen around them. "I already knew." He smiled. "I was just waiting for you to say it." Somewhere, stocks still rose and fell, headlines still spun, but in this room, between them, was a beginning, imperfect, but real. They married on a gentle Sunday morning in the small garden behind their new home. No grand guest list, no reporters, no cameras, just white flowers, soft sunlight, a few close friends, and two people in love, whispering vows with trembling voices. Emma wore a simple silk dress, the waistline gently tailored to accommodate her growing belly. Adrian held her hand through the entire ceremony, tightly as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. Since discovering her pregnancy, he had become astonishingly attentive. He learned how to brew ginger tea for her nausea. He crossed out every ingredient she couldn't tolerate from their meals. Every night he massaged her swollen feet. And though he ran an empire by day, Adrian Cole never hesitated to kneel and tie his wife's shoes when she could no longer reach them. "You're overdoing it," she laughed one night, watching him test the bathwater temperature for the third time. "There's no such thing as overdoing it when it comes to you," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Their little home needed no approval from the world. Because, in every act of his care, Emma had found the fullest definition of love. The contractions began on a soft, rainy morning. Emma was reviewing a staffing proposal when she paused, one hand over her belly, breathing deep. At first, it was mild. Then, slowly, steadily, stronger, real. Adrian nearly dropped his phone when she called. He bolted from a meeting, suit still on, the fastest he'd ever moved. He drove, opened every door, called the doctor, held her hand. His voice trembled, but his grip didn't. "Everything will be okay," he whispered, forehead against her hand as another wave hit. The delivery room felt like another world, sterile, bright, tense. But in that space, there were only three that mattered: Emma, Adrian, and the life that was about to arrive. "I'm so tired," she cried, sweat across her brow. "I know," Adrian whispered, his own eyes glistening, "but you're the strongest person I know. And our baby is listening to you." Then, like magic, a cry pierced the room. Small, strong, alive. A nurse laid the baby on Emma's chest, tiny, pink, dark-haired, fists curled, like she was gripping the whole world. Emma wept. Adrian wept. They both laughed, like they'd just touched a kind of happiness they never imagined. "Hello," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." Adrian wrapped his arms around them, hands trembling. "I don't know if I deserve this," he whispered, "but I'll spend every day trying. For both of you." That night, neither of them slept. Emma cradled their daughter against her chest, while Adrian sat by the hospital bed, his fingers brushing tiny toes, as if still afraid she might disappear. Every moment was fragile, miraculous, and theirs. Weeks later, their small apartment rang with baby giggles, bottle clinks, and whispered arguments over who got to hold her next. One afternoon, Emma sat by the window, baby in her arms, Adrian beside her, head resting on her shoulder. "If I hadn't looked at you twice that first day," he murmured, "I would have still walked in," she smiled. They didn't have a perfect beginning. They had missteps, silences, fear. But they chose each other, and they chose to stay every single day. Because the greatest loves don't always arrive on time, but when they do, they rewrite everything and stay long enough to become forever.